aisles, the kind that doesn't get much foot traffic even during the day. I had a pallet of boxes to unload and was deep into the task when I heard it. A faint clatter, like something had fallen over. I paused, the sound echoing through the aisles, and for a moment I stood there, listening. Nothing. I shook my head, figuring it was just something that had shifted on the shelves. But then I heard it again. This time, closer. I grabbed my flashlight and peered down the aisle. Everything seemed normal. The shelves were in place, the boxes stacked where I'd left them. I stood there for a moment, straining to hear anything else, but there was only silence. I shrugged it off, trying to convince myself that I was being paranoid. It was just the building settling. That's what I told myself. Until the following night, I was organizing and inventorying in the back of the warehouse, the farthest point from the loading dock. The lights were always dimmer back there, and the air felt cooler, almost like the temperature dropped a few degrees the further back you went. It was probably just a quirk of the building, but it always made me feel uneasy. I was about halfway through my shift when I saw it, a shadow. It darted between the rows of shelves. My hand gripped the box cutter a little tighter as my eyes scanned the aisles. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing in the silence. No response. I stood there, waiting for the shadow to reappear, but
put him over.
But there was nothing.
Gross.
Just row after row of boxes and shelves, all neatly organized. I tried to laugh it off. Maybe I was just tired. It wouldn't be the first time my mind played tricks on me during a long shift. But something about the way that shadow moved, it didn't feel like a trick. Still, I pushed the thought aside and kept working. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The following week, the noises started getting worse. It wasn't just random clattering or the hum of the building anymore. I started hearing footsteps, clear, unmistakable footsteps. It always happened around the same time, sometime after midnight. I'd be working, minding my own business when I'd hear them. Footsteps echoing through the warehouse. Sometimes they seemed far away, but other times they sounded like they were coming from the next aisle over. I'd do whatever I was doing and rush over, but no one was ever there. It didn't make sense. There were security cameras all over the warehouse, and I'd check them whenever I heard something strange. Nothing. I was alone. But those footsteps, they were real. I know they were. One night, after hearing the footsteps yet again, I decided to check the security footage more carefully. I went to the management office and started scrolling through the feed. Everything seemed normal, until I got to the footage from the back of the warehouse.
All I can say is,
there, on the screen, I saw it, a figure. It was faint, almost like a blur, but it was there, moving between the rows of shelves, just like I'd seen in the corner of my eye. I paused the footage and stared at the screen. My heart was racing. I couldn't make out any details, just the shape of a person moving too quickly for the camera to focus. That's when I realized I wasn't imagining things. Something or someone was in the warehouse with me. The next night, I almost didn't come to work. I'd been feeling on edge for weeks, but I couldn't afford to miss a shift. Rent was due, and I needed the paycheck. So I clocked in, grabbed my clipboard, and got to work, trying to ignore the pit of dread in my stomach. Everything was fine for the first couple of hours. Quiet, just like it always was. But around midnight, things started to go wrong. I was stacking boxes in one of the far aisles when I heard a crash from the front of the warehouse. My heart jumped into my throat as I grabbed my flashlight and hurried toward the sound. When I got there, I found a pallet of boxes scattered across the floor. It looked like someone had shoved them over. I checked the security feed again, but the footage was useless, just static. That had never happened before. I felt my stomach twist with unease as I tried to figure out what to do. Was someone messing with me, or was it something else? Before I could make a decision, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then went out completely. I was plunged into darkness, the only light coming from the faint beam of my flashlight. That's when I heard it, the footsteps. But this time, they weren't far away. They were close. Too close. I stood there frozen, listening as the footsteps grew louder, closer. My flashlight shook in my hand as I slowly turned around, shining the beam down the aisle. And that's when I saw it, a figure standing at the far end of the aisle. It was tall, its face obscured by shadows, but I could see the faint outline of a person. They were just standing there, staring at me. I could feel my heart thudding against my ribs as I tried to process what I was seeing. "Who are you?" I called out, my voice trembling. "What do you want?" The figure didn't respond. I took a step back, my hands shaking as I tried to keep the flashlight steady. The figure didn't move, but I could feel its gaze on me, cold and unrelenting. And then, without warning, it started moving toward me. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I turned and ran, sprinting down the aisle as fast as I could. I could hear the footsteps behind me echoing off the walls. I darted through the maze of shelves, trying to find a way out. The warehouse felt like a labyrinth, the rows of boxes stretching out endlessly in every direction. I could hear the figure gaining on me, its footsteps growing louder with each passing second. Finally, I reached the loading dock. I slammed my hand against the emergency door release, and with a loud beep, the door swung open. I stumbled outside, gasping for breath, and turned to look behind me. The figure was gone. The warehouse was silent once more, as if nothing had happened. I stood there, trembling, trying to catch my breath. My mind raced with questions, but I didn't have any answers. I didn't know who or what that figure was, but I knew one thing for sure. I was never going back in there again. I quit the next day. The warehouse was haunted, or cursed, or something. I didn't care. All I knew was that whatever had been in there with me that night wasn't human. I don't know what I saw that night, and I don't want to know. Driving deliveries for a small courier firm isn't my dream job, but it gets the bills covered. Most of the time, the work is straightforward. Pick up the package, drop it off, repeat. I usually do day shifts, but with the holiday rush, I was asked to cover some night deliveries. At first, I was fine with it. Driving through quiet streets with no traffic, listening to my favorite podcasts. On my first night, I was scheduled to deliver a few packages to a business district about an hour outside of town. It was already dark by the time I left the warehouse, the kind of cold, moonless night that made everything seem a little more sinister. Still, I wasn't too worried. I'd done late night runs before and never had any issues. The business district I was heading to was a weird spot, though. It was part of an industrial park with rows of warehouses and offices tucked away in a remote area just off the main highway. The place was pretty much deserted after dark. No one worked there at night, which meant it was usually quiet, almost too quiet. As I drove down the long stretch of road leading to the industrial park, I kept telling myself it was just another delivery, in and out. But something felt different that night. The air felt heavier, and there was a sense of unease I couldn't shake. I arrived at the industrial park just before midnight. The whole area was eerily silent, with only a few dim streetlights casting long shadows across the pavement. The warehouses and office buildings loomed like silent giants, their windows dark and uninviting. I parked my van in front of the first building on my route, a large, nondescript office with a plain concrete exterior. I grabbed the package from the back of the van and walked toward the entrance. It was supposed to be a simple drop-off. Scan the package, leave it in the designated drop box, and go. But as I approached the door, I noticed something strange. The front door was slightly ajar, just enough for me to see the dim glow of a flickering light inside. That wasn't normal. The place should have been locked up for the night with no one around. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should go inside and see if anyone was there, but my instincts told me to just drop the package and leave. I decided to leave it in the drop box and get out of there. As I scanned the package, I felt like someone was watching me. I couldn't explain it. It was just this creeping sensation that made the hair.
Yes, my child? What? I can hear you just fine, though. Call me back later, then. Bye.
shake off the feeling. But as I climbed into the driver's seat, I glanced back at the building. The door was now closed. I told myself it was...
I couldn't fucking resist. Sperm bank, you jack and we pack them. Yeah. That's weird. That's really weird. And it won't go. Yeah, that sounds like a headache. I know that basically emphasis on hit me or anyone else. It's usually I'm the one that does that. I'm pretty sure not always though. Pretty sure somebody else does that too. Fuck. So, how are things going? Did you get what you wanted? So you had to go back out to the truck to get whatever it out. You know, get what you got to get it loose. So it looks like you potentially lost out on that one. Right? Yeah. It just sucks that you couldn't get what you wanted because of one fucking bolt. If it was me and if I was able to, fuck, I would have done what I could to rip it out or cut it out. I'm talking about the bolt. Like use a pry bar or some shit and basically fuck it up and pry it out. But you didn't think of the pry bar. Oh, that's fucked up. Yeah, that's bullshit. Oh, and I'm finally good on weight. I'm happy about that. Removed two of the boxes. They said that weighed supposedly 5,500 pounds, and then basically move some of the load forward, and that did the trick. Not only did it get the weight off the ass, but it also got it towards under gross. So good, I'm legal. Yeah, that was a pain in the ass. I hate when that fucking shit happens. Like, really? I tell you where to freaking basically load it, and you load it how the fuck you want. Really? Sometime, yeah. Yeah. But they gotta find me a load from, I guess, from probably Colorado to you. Get to Colorado before noon? That ain't happening. I still have over 500 miles to go. And I've got like 2 hours left on my clock. So, let me go fucking look at this shit. Come on. Wrong text messages. This one. What the fuck? Where the hell is it? Motherfucker. Where the hell is the damn text message? Okay, it's going to Aurora. Yeah, I know, and I still have over 500 fucking miles to go. I'm gonna. That's the hope. And Octavian says tomorrow he's gonna look for a load. Yeah, that doesn't fucking help. You should have already had the next load. Yeah, no, that's not the way this company wants it. They want this product now. They don't want to wait for the product. They want it now. And two, I've got to go to the dentist, remember? Yeah, except after I had the teeth pulled, my head's going to hurt for like a couple of days. I was originally planning on just the wedding, but then the tooth problem came into play, and I'm like, fuck. That's going to hold it up. Then once the tooth pain goes away for the most part, I'll tell them, all right, let's grab me a load, let's get going. Because I also have to have Grant come deliver the ink to me. It's not only just the printer printer ink, but it's also it's not quite a ballpoint pen, but it's like an older style pen, what the hell it's called. But yeah, I'm just gonna have him deliver the pens and the ink to me, because that's all I've bought online so far. But frickin' A. Once I get all that, the tooth pain stops, so I'm back on the road. As much as it sucks, I'd like to take some more time off. But whatever. Like maybe spending a day where, like, say, me and you and hopefully what's his name's in town. We'll go to the movies and watch a cool movie or some shit. I don't know. Damn it. No fun. We had to go through Vale. Fun. Not. What, high wind or some shit? Yeah, because you stay in Utah, duh. Knock it off. Die off. Stupid wind. What station? Oh, it's closed. wish I could still drink drinks with caffeine in it. Fuck, I'm jealous. You get to enjoy it, I don't. Oh shit. Because when you found the woman you like, and two, basically you're just happy with life. Right? Yeah, and they're until then. Yeah, and unfortunately, my life got changed because of the lactose and the caffeine bullshit. So I had to make some changes I didn't want to have to fucking make. Fucking enjoyed it up until then. I mean, to a degree, yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of jealous of you because you get to enjoy the one thing I can't touch. Just sort of in general, like I like Dr. Pepper and Pepsi and all that kind of stuff, but I can't fucking touch it. It sucks, but whatever. Here's what it is. Just remember, the older you get, the more your body's going to bitch and moan. Just remember that. You're probably thinking, yeah, right. No, it will. Your body's going to bitch and moan. And you're going to have to make some changes that you don't want to make. And it sucks. It really does. Good, you get to play with that. Alright, plug it into your truck and see what all it offers. No, I'm saying when you get it updated and stuff, take it out to your truck and plug it in, see what all it offers on Chevys. What make and model of it is this scanner? Ah, okay. And how much did you pay for this one? Damn. That's a good chunk of change. What did you pay for the last one? Do you remember? No, that's still a big difference. But think about it. You can also it'll start paying itself back when you do a few when you do a few diagnoses. What they say. Neither do I. Right. It's like they can't expect you to give handout after handout after handout. It doesn't work that way. How the fuck are you supposed to make money if you just keep giving handouts? Doesn't work that way. Did I expect you to give me a handout? No. But you kind of did. Even though I wasn't expecting it, I was expecting you to fucking charge me for all the repairs. And you gave me some discounts. Even though I wasn't expecting it. Yeah. Ow. All right, later.
The door shut, even though I didn't hear any noise. Still, I couldn't shake the unease as I headed to my next delivery. This one was at a warehouse on the far edge of the industrial park, even more isolated than the first location. I followed the narrow, winding road that led to the building, my headlights the only light. The warehouse loomed ahead, its metal siding glinting faintly in the dim light. I parked the van near the entrance and grabbed the package. As I approached the door, I saw something, or rather someone, standing near the back of the building. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, but as I got closer, I could make out the figure of a man, standing perfectly still near the loading dock. He wasn't moving, just standing there, facing away from me. His posture was unnaturally stiff, like he was waiting for something. "Hey," I called out, my voice echoing through the quiet night. "You work here?" The figure didn't respond. He didn't move at all. I felt my heart rate quicken as I took a step closer, my hand tightening around the package. Something about the way he was standing, the stillness of it, sent a chill down my spine. I took another step forward, but just as I did, the figure vanished. I blinked, my mind racing to make sense of what I'd just seen. 1 second he was there, and the next, he was gone, like he just disappeared into thin air. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as I quickly dropped the package off and rushed back to my van. I started the engine, my hands shaking, and sped out of there without looking back. The rest of my deliveries were supposed to be routine, but after the encounter at the warehouse, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Every time I turned a corner or parked outside another building, a part of me thought I might see that figure standing there, watching me. It wasn't until my final delivery of the night that things really took a turn for the worse. My last stop was at a small office building at the very edge of the industrial park. The place looked abandoned. No lights, no cars in the lot, and the windows were covered in grime, like no one had been there for years. But the address matched the one on the package, so I figured it was just an old building that hadn't been updated in the system. I parked the van and got out, the cold air biting at my skin. The silence was deafening, broken only by the soft crunch of gravel under my boots as I walked toward the building. As I approached the front door, I noticed something strange, a piece of paper taped to the glass. It looked like some kind of note, hastily written in red marker. I squinted in the dim light, trying to make out the words. "Leave now, you're being watched." My heart skipped a beat. I stared at the note, my mind racing. Was this some kind of prank? A joke left by a bored employee? But then I remembered the figure I'd seen earlier, and my stomach churned with dread. Suddenly the air felt heavier, suffocating. I glanced around, but the lot was empty. I was alone, or at least, I thought I was. I dropped the package at the door, my hands trembling, and turned to head back to the van. But as I started walking, I heard it. a soft rustling sound coming from behind me. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Slowly, I turned around. The figure was back. He was standing in the shadows near the corner of the building, just far enough away that I couldn't make out his features. But I knew it was him, the same figure I'd seen at the warehouse, the same unnerving stillness, the same eerie presence. He didn't move, didn't make a sound. He just stood there. Panic surged through me as I turned and ran to the van, my heart pounding in my ears. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the door open. I threw myself into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and locked it. But as I started the engine, I saw him again. He was standing in the middle of the road, directly in front of the van. His face was still obscured by shadows, but I could feel his eyes on me, burning through the darkness. I didn't wait. I floored the gas pedal, swerving around him. My headlights caught a brief glimpse of his figure as I sped past him, but when I looked in the rearview mirror, he was gone. I drove out of that industrial park as fast as I could, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. I kept looking in the mirrors, but the road behind me was empty. I didn't stop driving until I was back on the highway, miles away from the industrial park. My heart was still racing, and my mind was spinning with questions. Who was that figure? Why was he following me? And what the hell did that note mean? I tried to calm myself down, telling myself it was just some kind of prank or coincidence, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Something about that night felt different, like I had crossed some invisible line into a place I wasn't supposed to be. I finished my route and returned to the warehouse to drop off the van, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched. As I handed in my keys and clocked out, I saw the dispatcher looking at me with a strange expression. He opened his mouth like he was going to say something, but then he shook his head and handed me my receipt. "Everything okay?" I asked, my voice sounding more casual than I felt. He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, it's just strange. Another driver reported seeing someone hanging around the industrial park last week. Said it creeped him out." My stomach dropped. "Did they say what he looked like?" I asked. He shook his head. "No, just said he felt like he was being followed." I didn't say anything after that. I just left. It's been a few days since that night and I haven't gone back to work. I told him I was sick, but the truth is, I'm scared. Scared that if... I'll see him again. If these stories kept you on edge, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more spine-tingling content. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss a chilling upload. Have your own night shift horror story, share it in the comments below. We'd love to hear it. Stay safe out there, and remember, sometimes the scariest things happen when the world is asleep. Until next time, keep the lights on, and I'll see you in the next nightmare. It was a typical Friday night at home. My wife Laura and I had just finished watching a movie with our two kids when we decided it was time to call it a night. The kids ran upstairs, already in their pajamas, and Laura and I cleaned up the living room, folding blankets and picking up empty bowls of popcorn. It was one of those nights that I cherished, quiet, calm, and predictable. The house we lived in was a bit isolated, sitting on a large plot of land surrounded by woods. It was one of the reasons we bought it in the first place. Privacy. We had no close neighbors, and the idea of being tucked away from the world was appealing. But on nights like this, when the house was dark and the wind whispered through the trees, that same isolation. After tucking the kids in and checking all the doors, I headed to bed, expecting nothing more than a quiet night's sleep. I had no idea the night was just getting started. It was around 2 a.m. when I woke up. At first, I wasn't sure what had stirred me from sleep, but as I lay there, listening to the soft sound of Laura's breathing beside me, I heard it, a faint tapping noise. I sat up in bed, trying to figure out where it was coming from. It was slow and rhythmic, like someone lightly tapping on glass. My heart rate picked up as I looked toward the window. It was dark outside, and the moonlight cast long shadows across the yard. I tried to convince myself it was just the wind, but the tapping continued, deliberate and constant. I slipped out of bed as quietly as I could, careful not to wake Laura. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand and used its light to guide me down the hall. As I reached the
LOL. Can you watch YouTube on that? LOL.
Up the stairs, I paused, listening again. The sound was coming from the living room, from one of the large windows that overlooked the front yard. I took a deep breath and crept down the stairs. As I neared the living room, I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. The house was silent except for that persistent tapping. When I reached the window, I saw it, a figure standing just outside, illuminated by the faint moonlight. The figure was barely visible, but they were there, their hand tapping slowly against the glass. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The figure was just standing there, watching the house and tapping slowly against the glass. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the shadowy figure outside. It could have been seconds, but it felt like hours. I couldn't fully process what I was looking at. Who would be out here, in the middle of the night, tapping on our window? Suddenly, the figure stepped back, melting into the darkness of the yard. My heart raced as I pressed my face closer to the glass, searching for any sign of movement. But there was nothing, just the empty yard and the dark outline of the trees beyond. I reached for the light switch and flicked it on, casting a warm glow across the living room. My eyes darted to the window again, but the figure was gone. I wanted to believe it was just a trick of my imagination, shadows playing with my mind, but deep down, I couldn't deny what I saw. Still shaken, I double-checked the locks on the doors and windows before heading back upstairs. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, but the unease followed me back to bed, and I spent the rest of the night lying awake, listening for any sound that might indicate the figure had returned. The next morning, I decided not to tell Laura about what I had seen. I didn't want to worry her, especially if it turned out to be nothing. But the unease stayed with me all day. I found myself looking out the windows more often than usual, expecting to see that shadowy figure standing in the yard again. And it wasn't until the following night that things escalated. We had just finished dinner, and the kids were upstairs getting ready for bed. Laura and I were sitting in the living room, catching up on a show, when it happened again. The tapping. This time, it wasn't faint or distant. It was louder, more insistent, coming from the window just a few feet away from where we were sitting. Laura turned to me, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. "Did you hear that?" she asked. I nodded, my pulse quickening. I motioned for Laura to stay where she was. As I approached the window, I shined the flashlight outside, sweeping it across the yard. And there it was again, the same figure, standing just beyond the reach of the light. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice stronger than I felt. The figure didn't respond. I took a step closer to the window, but the moment I did, the figure retreated into the darkness, disappearing among the trees. Laura joined me at the window, her face pale. "What's going on?" she whispered. "Why are they doing this?" "I don't know," I replied, my voice shaking. "But I'm calling the police." The police arrived about 20 minutes later, their flashing lights casting an eerie glow over our yard. 2 officers walked the perimeter of the house, checking the windows and doors, while another took my statement. "Did you get a good look at the person?" the officer asked, jotting down notes in his notepad. I shook my head. No, they were standing in the shadows. I couldn't see their face. The officer nodded, his expression calm but concerned. We'll patrol the area and keep an eye out, but it could be a prank. It happens sometimes in more remote areas like this." "A prank?"
Maybe you could watch Mitus Tech Tips on it, LOL.
Laura repeated, her voice filled with disbelief. Who would do something like this? The officer didn't have an answer. After the police left, we tried to go about our evening as normally as possible, but the tension in the house was palpable. We were on edge. I stayed up late that night, sitting by the window, watching the yard, waiting for the figure to return. But the hours passed in silence, and by the time dawn broke, I was left wondering if the worst was still to come. For the next few nights, things were quiet. There were no more tapping sounds, no shadowy figures in the yard. I started to think that maybe the police were right. Maybe it had just been a prank, someone trying to scare us for fun. But then, on the fifth night, it happened. We had all gone to bed. After what had happened, we started taking the children to sleep with us in our room.
That's funny.
The house was quiet and still. I was half asleep when I heard it. A soft, almost imperceptible creak. My eyes flew open, and I sat up in bed, listening. The sound came again. This time it was closer. A faint shuffle, like someone moving carefully through the hallway. My heart dropped. Someone was inside the house. I reached over and shook Laura awake, motioning for her to stay quiet. She sat up, her eyes wide with fear, as I grabbed the flashlight and was about to creep out of the bedroom. That's when I saw him. The figure was standing at the doorway of our bedroom, his silhouette barely visible in the dim light. But I could see the gleam of something in his hand. A knife. For a moment I couldn't breathe. The feeling of terror hit me like a punch to the gut, sudden and suffocating. The knife catching a faint glow from the hallway. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "Stay quiet," he said, his tone chilling in its calmness. "I won't hurt you. We just want your things." Behind him, I could hear the faint sound of footsteps downstairs, the creak of floorboards, drawers being opened and closed. My stomach turned. There were more of them. "I've got two guys downstairs," the intruder continued, his voice steady. "We're going to take what we want and then we'll leave. No one has to get hurt, but you need to stay quiet." My hands clenched around the edge of the bedsheet as I tried to keep my breathing steady. Beside me, Laura was trembling, her wide eyes locked on the man. She didn't move, barely even blinked. For a split second, my mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. Could I overpower him? Could I grab something, anything, to protect us? But the knife glinted again in the doorway, and that's when it hit me, how powerless I really was. I couldn't save my family. I couldn't stop this from happening. I was at the mercy of this man, of these people who had turned our home into a prison. The realization settled into my bones like ice, the fear no longer just in my head, but in every fiber of my body, paralyzing me with its cold grip. In that moment, I wasn't just scared. I was completely and utterly helpless. And that, more than anything, was the worst part. I nodded, my voice barely a whisper. "Okay, just don't hurt my family." The man's expression didn't change. He stood there, watching us, his eyes cold and empty. The sound of rummaging downstairs grew louder. Voices, footsteps, the sound of things being tossed aside. Every second felt like an eternity. I kept expecting the man to lunge forward to do something unpredictable. But he just stood there, like a predator waiting for his prey to settle. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours, until finally the noises downstairs began to fade. A voice called up from below, "We're done." The man at the door gave a small nod, as if signaling to someone only he could see. "Remember," he said, his voice as cold as the knife in his hand. "Stay quiet." He backed out of the room, his steps slow and deliberate, never turning his back on us. I could hear him retreating down the stairs, the creak of the floorboards growing fainter with each step. The kids were still sleeping. Laura and I didn't move. We didn't dare. The house was eerily silent except for the faint thuds of the intruders leaving. When the front door finally clicked shut, I let out the breath I didn't know I had been holding. My whole body shook as I scrambled out of bed, rushing to lock the door behind them. Laura collapsed into sobs, and I grabbed her, holding her as tightly as I could. We didn't call the police right away. We were too scared, too shaken to even think clearly. It wasn't until an hour later, when the fear gave way to anger, that I finally picked up the phone. The police arrived within minutes, but it was too late. The intruders were gone. They had taken everything they could. Electronics, jewelry, even the kids' piggy banks. But the worst part wasn't what they took. It was the violation. The feeling of being completely powerless in our own home. The police told us the same thing they always say in these situations. Change the locks, get security cameras. But none of that really helped. For weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were still out there, watching. Every creak in the house sent me into a panic. Every night as I lay in bed, I replayed that moment, the figure standing in the doorway, the knife in his hand, and the cold, empty promise that they wouldn't hurt us. But the truth was, they already had. I've always considered myself a judgment character. My wife, Megan, jokes that I can read people the moment I meet them, and I've prided myself on that
Very
skill.
funny.
We had moved into our new house about a year ago. It felt like the perfect place to raise our son, Connor. It wasn't long before we got to know our neighbors. There was Mrs. Thompson across the street who loved to bring over baked goods, the young couple next door who had just gotten married, and then there was Greg. Greg lived a few houses down, a middle-aged man who lived alone. He was always the first to offer a hand if you needed help. Friendly, unassuming, always with a smile. If you needed a tool, Greg had it. If your car broke down, Greg would be there in minutes to lend a hand. We liked Greg. Everyone did. It wasn't until things started disappearing from our house that I began to see Greg in a different light. It started with small things, items we could easily overlook. A pair of sunglasses, my phone charger, and Megan's hairbrush. Things we chalked up to being misplaced. Nothing more. We had a 3-year-old after all, and toddlers are notorious for moving things around the house. At first we thought Connor was playing with our things and leaving them in odd places. But it kept happening. One night, Megan couldn't find her favorite necklace. She swore she had left it on the kitchen counter, but when she went to grab it before dinner, it was gone. We searched the entire house, under the couch, behind the dressers, in the car, nothing. It took a few days for me to start suspecting that something far more unsettling was at play. My wristwatch, a gift Megan had given me on our anniversary, vanished from the bathroom counter. I knew I hadn't moved it, but there it was, gone. I mentioned it to Megan, and she brushed it off, saying it was probably misplaced like the other things. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. One evening, after putting Connor to bed, I decided to unwind with a glass of wine in the backyard. Megan was out with friends, and the house was quiet. It was one of those calm summer nights, the kind where the air is still, and the only sounds are the occasional chirps of crickets. I had just settled into my chair when I noticed something. Staring at the ladder in disbelief. It hadn't been there earlier. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of it. Had I forgotten we had left it there after cleaning the gutters? No, we hadn't used it in weeks. I slowly stood up, my eyes locked on the window above. Was someone up there? I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that someone had been watching, waiting for the right moment to climb inside. I moved closer to the house, feeling exposed, as if every step I took was being observed. I looked up again, straining to see if there was any movement in the window, but nothing stirred. The window was closed, the curtains still. With trembling hands, I grabbed the ladder and yanked it down, my heart racing. I stood there for a moment, staring up the window, wondering if whoever had placed it there was still nearby, watching me. When Megan got home an hour later, I told her what I'd found. She tried to laugh it off, suggesting it could have been a neighbor messing around, or maybe even kids from down the street. But the uneasy feeling gnawed at me, and deep down, I knew it wasn't a prank. Someone had put that ladder there, and I couldn't shake the thought that whoever it was had been planning to climb in. A few days after the incident in the backyard, Greg showed up at our door with his usual smile. "Need any help with anything?" he asked, glancing around the yard. "I noticed your hedge looks like it could use a trim." I thanked him and told him I'd handle it later, but he insisted. "No trouble at all," he said. "I've got some time. Besides, I like keeping busy." That was Greg, always willing to help. He spent the afternoon trimming the hedge, chatting with me about mundane things. I was grateful for the help, but something about the way he looked at the house, at the windows, made me uneasy. He had an intensity in his eyes that I hadn't noticed before. Later that evening, I mentioned it to Megan, but she dismissed it. "Greg's just a nice guy," she said. "You're overthinking things." Maybe she was right, maybe I was being paranoid. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. A few weeks passed without any more strange occurrences, and I started to relax. Maybe Megan was right. Maybe I had been overreacting. Life settled back into its routine, and I started to feel comfortable in our home again. Then, there is the night that everything changed. Megan and I were watching TV in the living room when we heard a faint rustling sound coming from upstairs. At first, we thought it was Connor. Maybe he had woken up and was playing in his room. But when we checked the baby monitor, he was sound asleep. The sound continued. A soft, almost deliberate noise, like someone was moving around in the hallway. I grabbed a flashlight and told Megan to stay with Connor while I went to check it out. My heart was pounding as I made my way upstairs. The house eerily quiet except for that faint rustling. I reached the top of the stairs and shone the flashlight down the hallway. And there he was, Greg. He was standing in the doorway of our bedroom, his back to me, rummaging through one of Megan's jewelry boxes. For a moment, I couldn't move, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. Greg, our friendly, helpful neighbor, was in our house. He had broken in, and he was stealing from us. The rage hit me all at once. "Greg," I shouted, my voice shaking with anger. He froze, turning slowly to face me. For a moment, his face was blank, like he didn't recognize me. Then, a smile. A slow, twisted smile spread across his face. "I was just helping," he said, his voice calm, almost casual. He left the door unlocked. I knew that was a lie. We always locked the doors at night. Always. My hands were trembling as I stood there. I couldn't believe this was happening. Greg, the guy who had always been so kind and helpful, was standing in my house, acting like he had every right to be there. "What the hell are you doing?" I demanded, taking a step forward. Greg didn't move. He just stood there, watching me with that same unsettling smile. "I've been helping you," he said softly. "You didn't even know, did you? All those times you thought you'd lost something. I was just borrowing it, keeping it safe." My mind raced as his words sank in. Greg had been in our house before, sneaking in when we weren't home, taking things, watching us. He had been manipulating us from the beginning, playing the role of the perfect neighbor while invading our lives. I felt sick. "You need to leave," I said. "Now." For a moment, Greg didn't move. His eyes flicked toward the hallway, then back to me. The tension in the air was suffocating, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Then, without a word, he turned and walked past me, down the stairs and out the front door. I locked it behind him, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the latch to turn. We called the police that night, and they came to take a report. Greg was gone by the time they arrived, and they didn't find any signs of forced entry. He'd been using a spare key, a key we didn't even know was missing. The officers told us we were lucky. It could have been much worse. In the days that followed, I couldn't stop thinking about all the times Greg had been inside our home, watching us, taking things, maybe even listening to our conversations. It wasn't just the invasion of our physical space that haunted me. It was the betrayal. We had trusted him, and he had violated that trust in the most personal, horrifying way possible. We never saw Greg again. The police told us he had packed up and moved out of the neighborhood just days after the incident. But I still feel his presence sometimes, like he's still watching us from somewhere. I don't think I'll ever truly feel safe again.
Yeah, that's coming down pretty hard.
When we moved into our new house, everything seemed perfect. It was a cozy two-story home with a spacious backyard and a finished basement, which we intended
That's with the wipers
to
off.
be a game room for our kids. The house was in a good, friendly neighborhood, and the price was almost too good to be true. It felt like we had finally found the home where we could settle down
How you doing?
and raise our family. At first, everything was great. My wife, Sarah,
I had to go back and have him rework the load. Because I was overweight. I was 81,000 some odd pounds. The trailer axle was 47,000 some odd pounds. Yeah, I was overweight, so they had to take some stuff off and move some stuff around to get me legal on weight. That's a pain in the butt.
Wiring probably needed an update, but it didn't sit right with me. Then there were the sounds. At night, as we lay in bed, I would hear faint creaks coming from the basement. It was as if someone was walking around down there, even though we hadn't fully set it up yet. Sarah didn't hear it at first, but as the nights
I'm going to let this run for a little bit if you want to watch the rain. If you don't, I
It
understand.
was a Saturday afternoon when I decided to tackle the basement. Sarah had taken the kids to a birthday party, so I had the house to myself. I figured I'd set up the game room as a surprise for the kids, maybe get a few hours of peace and quiet while doing it. But as
Nope,
I descended
I'm calling
the
it quits
stairs
for
to
the day.
basement, that quiet feeling of unease.
So if you want to sit there and watch the rain for a little bit, you're more than welcome.
The air down there was different, stale and heavy, as though it hadn't been disturbed in years.
Yeah, kind of pain in the butt. Like I said, I'm supposed to be
Myself, it was just my
getting to
imagination.
Utah so I can go
The basement was dim
to my cousin's wedding, but
small windows, letting
yeah,
in
this whole
faint
thing screwed it
glimmers
up.
of daylight.
So I might miss the
Flickering
wedding.
overhead light, but it flickered and then
Annoying
went
as
out
hell.
completely. Great, I muttered under my breath. I grabbed a flashlight from my toolbox and set to work. As I started moving boxes and arranging furniture, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see someone standing behind me, but of course, no one was there. Still, the feeling persisted. I tried to ignore it, focusing on setting up the ping pong table and together a shelf for the board games. But every so often, I would hear something.
What the heck was that?
Like fabric brushing.
Saw a
against
message on here saying
I stopped
severe
and listened,
something.
holding my breath. Nothing.
Severe
I shook my
thunderstorm
head, telling
national
myself I was being
weather
paranoid.
service.
It was just the basement. Dark, old basements always felt creepy.
Let's change it to the weather station. Let's see what's going on. Oh wow.
9-5 remains in effect until 10 p.m. for the following counties in Kansas: Atchison, Douglas, Jefferson, Osage, and Shawnee. Here are the 6 p.m. conditions for the local area. At Topeka, it was cloudy. The temperature was 68 degrees, the dew point 62, and the relative humidity was 81%. The wind was northwest at 13 miles an hour, gusting to 22. The pressure was 29.72 inches and rising. The National Weather Service in Topeka has issued a severe thunderstorm warning for northern Franklin County, southern Jefferson County in northeastern Kansas, southeastern Shawnee County, Douglas County, northeastern Osage County, until 7:30 p.m. At 6:41 p.m., severe thunderstorms were located along a line extending from near Grantville to near Overbrook to 3 miles north of Pomona Lake, moving east at 45 miles per hour. Expected hazards include 60 miles per hour wind gusts.
Whoa.
This is a radar-indicated threat. The following impacts are expected. Expects damage to roofs, siding, and trees. Locations impacted include southeastern Topeka, Lawrence, Baldwin City, Tecumseh, Eudora, Richland, Wellsville, Overbrook, Centropolis, Harry, Lecompton, Clinton, Lone Star, Pleasant Grove, Vinland, Williamstown, Grantville, Clinton Lake, Globe, and Barrytown. This includes the following highways: Interstate 35 near mile marker 198.
I'm on 70.
Kansas Turnpike between mile markers 182 and 205. For your protection, move to an interior room on the lowest floor of a building. A tornado watch remains in effect until 10 p.m. for northeastern and east central Kansas. The severe thunderstorm warning for southeastern Jackson County is canceled.
I'm close by
The storms
Topeka.
which prompted the warning have moved out of the warned area. Therefore, the warning has been canceled. A tornado watch remains in effect until 10 p.m. for northeastern and east central Kansas. A severe thunderstorm warning remains in effect until 7 p.m. for Jefferson and northeastern Shawnee counties. At 6:42 p.m., a severe thunderstorm warning remains in effect until 7 p.m. for central Jefferson and northeastern Shawnee counties. At 6:48 p.m., severe thunderstorms were located along a line extending from 6 miles east of Nortonville to 3 miles southeast of Winchester to 4 miles south of Oskaloosa, moving northeast at 40 miles per hour. Expected hazards include 60 miles per hour.
Oh, fuck. Stupid radio. Really?
The following impacts are expected. Expects damage to roofs, siding, and trees. Locations impacted include northeastern Topeka, Oskaloosa, McLeod, Ozaukee, Nortonville, Winchester, Perry Lake, and Grantville. A tornado watch remains in effect until 10 p.m. for northeastern and east central Kansas. For your protection, move to an interior room.
Okay, we get the picture.
The back of my neck stood up. I felt something, a presence, a cold draft that seemed to move through the room.
So just
even
in
though
this
the
area,
windows were
severe
shut.
thunderstorms.
I didn't stay down there much longer after
Over on
that.
the east end of it,
Over
I
the
guess.
next few days, the strange
tornado
occurrences
warning.
became more frequent. Sarah noticed it too. She would come into the kitchen in the morning and find the basement door open, even though we were both sure we had closed it the night before. We heard more noises at night. Footsteps, whispers, and once a faint
Hey.
knock coming from the basement
Hey, here's
door.
a bonus.
One
I'm getting a free truck wash.
Kids said, Sarah
Thanks,
and I
Mother
were
Nature.
watching TV in the living room when we heard a loud thump coming from the basement. It was so sudden and so loud that we both jumped, our eyes meeting with a shared look of alarm. "I'll go check it out," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. I grabbed a flashlight and slowly made my way to the basement door. As I reached for the handle, I hesitated. There was something about the basement that felt wrong. Like it wasn't just part of the house, but something separate. Something darker. I shook off the feeling and opened the door. The air was cold, colder than it should have been. I descended the stairs, my flashlight sweeping the room,
Oops.
but everything seemed to be in its place. No boxes had fallen, no furniture was overturned. Nothing was out of the ordinary, except for the fact that the temperature felt like it had dropped 10 degrees. I stood there for a moment, my breath visible in the beam of the flashlight, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. I went back upstairs, but the sense of dread lingered. It wasn't long before Harper and Max started noticing things too. Harper, our 8-year-old, came to us one night
True.
saying she didn't want to sleep in her room anymore.
That is true.
"Why, sweetheart?" Sarah asked, sitting on the edge of her bed. "There's someone in the basement," Harper whispered.
Okay, where's the audio? Radio's still on. It just paused for whatever reason. Why did it just pause? What the hell is going on here? I think we just lost audio. Hold on. I think it's on YouTube's end. Okay, this one's a little better. Halloween, trick or treat, horror stories. Okay, something goofy's going on. I think I know what's going on. That's what's going on, I think. Hold on. What's going on here? Where's the audio?
Wind gusts up to 50 miles per hour. This could knock down.
No different. My house was all
I
decked
can't
out in
change
orange
it
and
off.
black lights, a plastic skeleton hung on the front door, and I'd carved a particularly gruesome jack-o'-lantern that sat on the porch,
I know it's
flickering away with a
interesting to
tea
watch.
light inside.
Watching that lightning.
It had been a busy night, with a steady stream of trick-or-treaters coming by. Pirates, superheroes, witches, and princesses all filled the neighborhood. By the time 9 p.m. rolled around, things were winding down. The kids were heading home, and the streets were starting to empty out. I was about to turn off the porch light and call it a night when there was a knock on the door. Strange. Most of the younger kids had long since stopped coming, and the older ones usually just rang the doorbell. The knock was soft, almost hesitant, like whoever was out there wasn't entirely sure they should be. I grabbed the bowl of leftover candy, figuring it was one last trick-or-treater squeezing in before the night officially ended. When I opened the door, there was a boy standing on the porch. He couldn't have been more than 7 or 8, with messy brown hair sticking out from under a black hood. His costume was simple, just a plain black cloak with a mask that covered his whole face. The mask was cheap-looking, one of those generic ones you could pick up at the dollar store, but it had a strange design. A blank white face with hollow eyes and a thin, painted smile. "Trick or treat," he said, his voice soft and muffled through the mask. I smiled and held out the candy bowl. "You're out pretty late," I said, looking around to see if there were any other kids nearby. The street was empty, though. No parents waiting by the sidewalk. No groups of kids walking up and down the block. Just the boy standing alone on my porch. "Go ahead, take a few," I said, gesturing to the bowl. He reached out a small, gloved hand and grabbed a couple of pieces. I waited for him to say thank you or maybe turn and run off like the rest of the kids had done, but he just stood there, staring up at me through the mask. Something about it felt off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on why. Maybe it was the way he was standing, staring at me, or the fact that I couldn't see his eyes behind the mask. Or maybe it was just the time. He was the last trick-or-treater of the night, and something about that always felt a little eerie. "Do you need help getting home?" I asked, trying to shake off the unease. "Your parents around?" The boy didn't answer. He just stood there for a moment longer, then slowly turned and walked down the steps, disappearing into the darkness at the end of the street. I closed the door, shaking my head. Probably just a shy kid, I thought. I went back inside, set the candy bowl down on the table, and turned off the porch light. The house was quiet now, and I was ready to relax, maybe watch a scary movie before bed. But as I settled onto the couch, there was another knock on the door. That was weird. The porch light was off, and it was well past the time for trick-or-treaters. Maybe it was a neighbor or someone who had forgotten something. I got up and headed back to the door, thinking I'd see that same boy standing there again. But when I opened it, the porch was empty. The street was silent. I stepped outside, looking around. Nothing. No kids, no cars, no parents waiting by the curb. Just the wind rustling through the trees and the distant hum of traffic from the main road. I closed the door, locking it this time, and tried to brush off the weirdness. I was about to head back to the couch when I noticed something. The candy bowl on the table, it was empty. I was sure I had some candy left when I put the bowl down, but now it was completely empty, not a single piece left. Had I really given out that much? I couldn't remember. Another knock, louder this time. I froze, staring at the door. There was no way it was another trick-or-treater. Not this late, not with the porch light off. I moved slowly, creeping toward the door, trying to be as quiet as possible. I pressed my ear against the wood, listening. Nothing. No voices, no shuffling footsteps, just silence. I waited, heart thudding in my chest, wondering if I should just ignore it. But then, the knock came again. "Hello?" I called out, my voice a little shaky. "Is someone there?" No answer. I stood there for a few moments, then reached for the doorknob, slowly turning it. I opened the door just a crack, peering out through the gap. There, standing at the edge of the porch, was the boy in the black cloak. My stomach tightened. He was just there, standing in the exact same spot as before. His mask, with its hollow eyes and thin smile, seemed to glow faintly in the dim light from the street lamp. "Hey, buddy," I said, forcing a smile. "It's late. Do you need help getting home?" Again, he didn't answer. He just stood there, staring at me through the mask. I couldn't see his eyes, couldn't tell what he was thinking or feeling. For a moment, I considered calling the police, just to make sure he was okay, but something made me hesitate. "Do you want more candy?" I asked, trying to lighten the mood. He didn't respond. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, like he was considering something, and then he took a step closer. I backed up instinctively. "Okay," I said, my voice shaky. "I think you should go home now." The boy took another step and then another, moving slowly toward the door. I slammed it shut, locking it with trembling hands. My heart was racing now, and I didn't know why. It was just a kid, I told myself. Just a weird, quiet kid. But something about him, something about the way he moved, the way he watched me, felt wrong. I stood there for a few moments, listening, waiting for the sound of him walking away. But there was nothing. No footsteps, just silence. I peeked through the window, but the porch was empty. The boy was gone. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding and tried to shake off the lingering unease. That's when I noticed something odd. The candy bowl, the one I'd placed on the table inside, was now sitting on the porch, right where the boy had been standing. It was empty, just like before. I frowned, trying to figure out how it had gotten outside. Had I left the door unlocked? I opened the door, grabbed the bowl, and quickly shut it again. Something wasn't sitting right with me. I looked through the front window, scanning the street, but the boy had disappeared. No sign of him anywhere. I was about to shrug it off as a weird prank when I heard something else. A faint noise, not from the front, but from the back of the house. It was the back door. A quiet, barely noticeable creak. My stomach flipped. The kid out front, he wasn't the real problem. He had been distracting me. I tiptoed toward the kitchen, every muscle tense. The closer I got, the clearer it became someone was fiddling with the back door. I reached the kitchen just as the knob turned slightly. My pulse spiked. I grabbed the nearest thing, a heavy candle holder from the counter, and waited, gripping it tightly. The door inched open just an inch, and I caught the faint outline of a hand wrapped around the edge of the door. Without thinking, I slammed the candle holder into the door, forcing it shut with a loud bang. There was a dull thud, followed by hurried footsteps. They weren't expecting that. I ran to the back window and saw two figures sprinting away into the dark, one larger and the other about the size of the boy from earlier. My heart pounded with adrenaline, anger quickly replacing my fear. The kid had been keeping me distracted while his accomplices tried to break in. I locked the back door and raced through the house, checking every window, making sure everything was secure. I grabbed my phone and dialed the police. This wasn't some Halloween prank, it was a setup. The knocking, the kid, it had all been part of the plan to get me to the front of the house while someone else slipped in the back. When the officers arrived, I told them everything. But by the time they got there, the figures were long gone. They took my statement and said they'd patrol the area, but I knew those people weren't coming back tonight. After the cops left, I sat in the living room. My mind was full of questions. How long had they been watching the house? And what would have happened if I hadn't noticed the back door in time? I didn't sleep at all that night. It was the Halloween of my senior year, and I had almost decided to skip trick-or-treating that night. Most of my friends were over the whole dressing up thing, saying it was for kids, but not me. Halloween had always been my favorite time of year. The costumes, the candy, the whole spooky atmosphere just clicked with me. My friends thought it was lame, but I didn't care. There was something about walking around in the dark with jack-o'-lanterns lighting up doorways and the excitement of filling up a candy bag that I just couldn't resist. That year, I decided to go as a witch. Not exactly original, I know, but it was easy. Plus, I found this cool, oversized vintage witch's hat at a thrift store